Welcome everyone to the very first NASCAR Heat 2 video here on Knee Pit Gaming. So the focus of this video is going to be a breakdown of the recently released second dev diary. Now this video was released recently by Monster Games, who are the developers of NASCAR Heat 2. It's roughly a 3-minute long video, and what we're going to do is we're going to break it down into 4 parts here for our purposes. And after each of these 4 parts, I'm going to break in and give my notes and my thoughts on the part, and then we'll move on to the next parts. And then finally, I will end up the video with a few of my final thoughts and maybe some questions I have that this leaves us with going forward. So without further ado, let's get started.
You know, every year we try to improve it and make the game more and more authentic. To do a great job is not just one thing, it's getting thousands of details right.
We're really excited about career mode, not just because we added 2 new series, but also how you do on the racetrack will determine what kind of contracts you get and how much money you get from the various sponsors and which teams you'll be able to ultimately drive for.
The whole experience is really motivated by discussion when we had a chance to talk with some of the NASCAR drivers. And they described what the experience was like to start out as a new driver and break into the series, break into the first time they race. And so we kind of modeled the whole experience after that.
One of the things that we wanted to model was how it feels to be a driver when somebody comes to you and says, hey, we're going to offer you a new sponsorship on a new team and what that might feel like to leave the current team that you're on. We also wanted somebody who really liked the team they're on to be able to stay within that team. So as you get better, the team you're on gets.
Now this very first section of the video may have been only a minute long, but contains really the bulk of the information that's going to tell us what is it that we're going to be doing in the career mode of NASCAR Heat 2. So we start out with the knowledge that unlike NASCAR Heat Evolution, which only had the Cup Series, we know that we're going to be started out in the trucks, and we also have the ability to run in the Xfinity Series as well as the Cup Series. So we've got 2 new series that have been added to the game. So already we have more choices. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to be presented at the beginning of your career with some options in the truck series. Do you want to start out with maybe an upper tier truck team and have a chance to compete right away for championships and race wins? Or do you want to start out with maybe a second or a third tier team that's not quite as good, doesn't quite have the performance right now, and work your way up through? Also, the second thing that we know about that first season in the truck series is that you're going to receive hot seat offers based on how you finish and how well you're doing in the championship. These hot seat offers are going to be from Xfinity teams that are going to let you know that, hey, if we have a ride available at this upcoming race, it could be 1 or more races, and you're going to have goals. I know one of the slides in the video showed that you could run in the number 8 car, and if you finish in the top 8 in that race, you'll have the opportunity to maybe run more races in the future, whether it be this season or in an upcoming season with that team. So you're going to have options. Now, let's say you get to the end of the first season. You've done some of the hot seat offers, and let's say you've met the goals of those hot seat offers. Now you're going to have a choice. Do I want to stay in the trucks? I love the fact that the career mode is going to give us the ability to, if we want to have an entire career mode where we do nothing but race in the trucks, we never even think about moving up to Xfinity or Cup. I love that. That's great because, hey, maybe that's where you find the most fun is in the truck series. Fine. Stay there your entire career and focus on chasing down race wins and championships. That's great. Or maybe you decide that, yeah, after the first season, I'm ready to move up to Xfinity. Fine. You move up to Xfinity, you start your second season. All right, so now we're in our second season. We're going to be getting hot seat offers from Cup teams, again, depending on how well you're doing. Maybe if you're doing better, you get better offers to you. Let's say you meet those goals. Now we're ready for season 3, and perhaps you have an opportunity to move right into a full-time Cup ride. So these are the type of things, and as I will always say, I am a huge fan of developers giving us options. I like open-ended. I don't like to feel like I have to do certain things at certain times. So as I mentioned earlier, if I want to spend my entire career mode in the truck series, maybe I want to spend my entire career mode in the Xfinity series, that's perfectly fine and something that I'll be able to do. I love options, and anytime a game can give us options, the more the better. So there's a lot going on in that section. Now let's head to section 2, which is about momentum.
It's better.
We're really excited this year to have Brad Kozlowski involved in aiding our development. And one of the things we did early on was show him what we're planning to do for career mode and what it was like. And he was able to kind of give us some guidance and suggest some features. One of them that we're really excited about is this idea of momentum.
From week to week, if a driver is able to successfully race well and return home with his car intact without damaging it, the team can then therefore focus on improving that car from week to week rather than rebuilding cars for the driver. Having momentum improves basically the equipment that you get to race with.
This idea of momentum is really critical to, a team in real life, and so we wanted to model that in our career mode.
Now, this second section was a little bit shorter and talks about momentum. Now, we learned that the longer you stay with a team, the better that team gets. So that gives, going back to what we talked about in the first section, that gives a lot of hope to somebody who maybe wants to start out in a lower tier team and bring them up. Also, the momentum aspect comes in and lets you know that, hey, if you drive clean and don't do a lot of damage to the car, then the team can build momentum, meaning that they can spend their time in the shop working on improving the performance of your car or truck rather than having to spend all of their time each week between races working on repairing the car. Now, I have a couple of maybe questions or concerns about this particular aspect of it. Now, we know the focus of this game is more on the arcade side, and that's perfectly fine. They're trying to appeal to a wider audience, and I certainly have no problem with that. But I noticed during the video, and you may have picked up on this too, when it talks about momentum, it mentions that you get a 10% speed boost. Now, speed boost really doesn't mean anything in and of itself. What are we talking about here? It sounds very arcadey, and I'm not sure how to define it. Does that mean that we get a 10% horsepower boost in the next race? Does it mean we get 10% more grip added to the car? Do we get 10% reduction in drag? Is it all of the above? Who knows? So I don't like that it's really vague, those terms. So I'm not exactly sure what that means. Also, I'm a little concerned that it could get to gaming, if you will, to arcade gaming, where they, becomes more like Mario Kart, where you're searching for power-ups. I'm not particularly a fan on that. Of course, I come from the sim racing side of things, the more hardcore sim. So anytime they throw in attributes like that, it gets me a little worried. But I'm going to withhold judgment. I'm going to wait, and we're going to see how this goes. So now we're ready to move on to section 3, which talks about rivals.
In the real world, drivers have to make a decision every time they hit the track. How they drive and how they treat their fellow racers on the track have real world implications.
You start running some guys off the track and you start really being aggressive or overly aggressive with a couple different drivers, from race to race. You'll get feedback from real life drivers telling you, hey, you gotta cut it out there. You're developing some enemies.
Your rough driving's starting to make a few enemies out there. You might want to be careful.
As time goes on, you develop sort of on-track rivalries with a couple other drivers who will race you really aggressively.
Rivalries will make your experience in your career more difficult.
Just as with the second section of the video, which dealt with momentum and how that affects the performance of the team, I can see both good and bad, maybe negative aspects of the rivalry system, but let's really call it what it is. What they've done is they've implemented a reputation system for you as a driver. With that good and bad, I want to start off by focusing on the good. First and foremost, I always like it that there are rewards for good, clean driving. Good, clean driving generally leads to better finishes, which will lead to better reputation with the other drivers on the track. That part is good. Also, another good thing is maybe if you drive a little bit too aggressive, as it mentioned in the video, then other drivers will start to get mad at you and upset at you and maybe make your life harder by making it harder to pass them, maybe making their car or truck much wider than it normally would be if you were driving them much more cleanly. So that's the good thing. I can see very good aspects coming from that. Now to the downside. In the downside, we have to start off by mentioning the obvious, which is that this type of rivalry system has been done in NASCAR games before, and it didn't really work out all that great. So we'll start there. The good thing that could come from that is that Monster Games could have learned some lessons from the previous games and said, you know what, we don't want to repeat those mistakes. And the mistakes I think that could come in, the downside of this rivalry system is, number one, it could go too far. I mean, we could end up with players getting all out wrecked by AI cars if it goes too far. Now, hey, we all know this happens in real life. You can see examples involving Kyle Busch on multiple occasions, Carl Edwards, Brad Keselowski, and even going back to Jeff Gordon. So we've seen this in real life, but I hate to think that it's going to come to that in games where the AI is going to ruin your race, but who knows? Like I said, it does happen in real life, so it definitely wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities. Also, if it not only goes too far, but maybe goes too far too quickly. I'm a little bit worried about the possibility of maybe getting into a wreck at Daytona and instantly making all the drivers that were involved in that wreck really mad at you. Now, I've read in an article that I'm going to link in the description down below in Game Informer, where the developers are aware of being involved in huge wrecks, like, say, the big one at Daytona or Talladega, and instantly making a whole bunch of drivers really mad at you simply for being involved, not even necessarily causing the wreck. So they're aware of this and are taking steps to minimize that type of thing and really focus on rivals being more for your really, really aggressive driving, and not just once or twice, but multiple times. So I like that. But again, it is a question because I know that the rivalry system has been done before and hasn't necessarily worked out well. So here's to hoping that they have a much better design and implementation for it in NASCAR Heat 2. Now we'll move on to the fourth and final section of the video, which talks about custom painting.
You know, people always want to sort of take their own car and make it their own. And so we have a system in place that allows somebody to change up a base car and add, stripes and a bunch of different logos and stickers on it so they can take something that they might think is cool and make it a car they can drive in the game.
Essentially, for each series, player can come into the custom car setup and create their own look through decals and essentially create their own visual identity.
NASCAR Heat 2 arrives September 12th. Pre-order now at NASCARHeat.com.
So this fourth and final section deals exclusively with the paint shop or the custom painting portion of the game. Now, if you're familiar with NASCAR Heat Evolution, last year's game, it did not have any paint shop or any ability to adjust the paint scheme whatsoever. The game determined what your paint scheme was, what your colors were, what the design was, and you had no control over that in the career mode. So they've taken the next step forward, the next evolution, if you will, and including a very basic style of paint shop. So it appears that you see the slider there for the design, and it appears that there's probably a handful, maybe 4 or 5, even 6 basic designs that you can choose from. And then you get your basic sponsor logos. Where do you want to put, what kind of logo do you want to put on the hood, what's on the quarter panels, and so forth. Also, you get into several different colors and the different variants of those colors as well. So you have a very basic version of a paint shop here. So I think it's a good start. We'll see where they go in future iterations of the game next year and beyond. But I think it's a good start. It at least gives us something to work with. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to use these paint schemes in multiplayer racing, but I would imagine that's the direction that they're headed. So now let's move on to sort of summarize and some final thoughts that I have about the game. Now that we've had a chance to look at each of the 4 sections of the videos individually and sort of focus on them one at a time, now let's sort of back up a little bit, get more of a global perspective of what we learned from this video and what that hopefully gives us an impression of for the final game when it comes out in September. First, I would say the most obvious thing to me as I watched the trailers for NASCAR Heat 2, and especially this video with the breakdown of several factors, is it lets me know that this really is an evolution. This is a series that, let's face it, last year's game, and I think they've even admitted as much, it was pretty rushed. They didn't have a whole lot of time to get the game done, and therefore it was fairly basic and lacked a lot of the individuality and a lot of options that we as NASCAR fans would have preferred. So what this iteration of the game, now the second iteration, is going to do is since we're in year 2, they've got all the feedback that they've received, good and bad, from us as the players. So they've had a chance to implement some things and really revamp a lot of things, including the career mode, in this particular version of the game. And I see that continuing as the game moves forward. Last year, we didn't have a paint shop at all. Now we have a more basic paint shop. Who knows where we go in the season? They even mentioned in the video that one of the beauties of doing a NASCAR game is that you get to do one every year. So they definitely seem to be in this for the long haul, and they're planning ahead. So like I mentioned with the paint shop, last year we didn't have one at all. You had no control over what your car looked like in career mode, not the paint scheme, not the colors, not anything. Now you have a very basic paint shop here in the second year of the game, and it'll be interesting to see where they go in future years with that. Also, I am very hopeful, shall we say, since I have not had an advanced copy of the game, unlike some other YouTubers. I have not seen the game other than what you've seen in the trailer, but I'm hopeful for the career mode this time because it looks like they have completely revamped it. Now, we know that the old progression system, they've mentioned, it's gone. So the progression system of last year's game, where you started out with a lowly cup team and had to earn money through sponsorships and race winnings to upgrade your team's horsepower, grip, and so on, all that's gone. Okay, and it's been replaced by the new system, which starts us in the trucks and gives us the ability to move up through Xfinity and then finally to Cup if we so choose. What I really like about this is it removes the ties from last year, which had you and the team very much connected. So last year, it was basically your team. All of your race winnings and your sponsorship money, all of that went into improving the team. So it might as well have been your team. You might as well have been the team owner and the driver. This year, it appears as though they've really separated that, where you are the driver and you are driving for a team. Now, that also raises some questions for me. They highlight throughout the video that you can sign with different teams and they're going to pay you X amount of money per race. And it's different between the teams. A lower tier, I think in the video, what they showed is a lower tier team might pay you $5,000 a race in the truck series, whereas an upper tier team might pay you $10,000 a race. My question is, what do we really do with that money? If we're no longer upgrading the team by using our prize money, what are we doing with the money that we earn? How does that help? Now, one of the things that I think would be a possibility, I'm not saying it's in this game because we've been given no indication of that, but one of the things I would like to see possibly in the future is that you have the ability to take your winnings and use them toward purchasing a ride. Now, we all know if you pay attention very much to the off-the-track part of NASCAR, it's very much a business, and we know that the way drivers get rides is that they have sponsors. All right, if you've been following the Bubba Wallace situation here recently, you know that he is no longer in a full-time ride, and that's simply because of sponsorship. And after he pulled off the race win at Michigan last week, you know that there was a lot of outcry, particularly for Dale Jr. to give him a ride next year in the seat that's going to be vacated in the number 9 car on his Xfinity team. And Jr., in so many words, basically let him know that he's not in the business of just giving out rides like Santa Claus. He has to have the money, and then he put a hashtag of 6 million on there, basically letting you know that, hey, if you've got $6 million to bring to the race team, you can have this seat. And then Bubba Wallace, of course, replied saying, hey, I don't have $6 million to provide. So that's really what it's all about. Maybe, of course, we've seen this happen in Formula One all the time. A driver gets a ride in a car and people are negative about that driver. And it turns out that that driver came in with a load of money. They came in either with family money or sponsor money, and that's how they got the job. It's just the way the business of NASCAR is these days. Hasn't always necessarily been that way, but it definitely is now, and that's just part of it. So perhaps you could use your race winnings to help foot part of the bill. In the case of Junior's $6 million number, maybe you could work to offset maybe part of that, and maybe you could get $3 million from a sponsor, and maybe you could provide $3 million from your race winnings to get that right. Just an idea I'm throwing out there because at this point, I really don't know what we're going to be using our race winning money for. What are we going to be using our salary and our race winnings for? I don't know. And as far as I know, that's not been made available to you. So I'm a little worried that we're just going to be racking up money for really no reason and nothing to use it on. Also, another idea I've got, again, for future expansion, and I would really like to see this series of games really get into the Steam Workshop. All right, I know they've made their focus on the consoles. All right, I get that, and I understand why that is. But I think it would be really great if you could incorporate the Steam Workshop and give people the ability to, within the game, create fantasy rosters or custom rosters where they make up their own drivers. Maybe you race in a league with 10, 12, hopefully more guys in that league, and you want to create a fantasy roster in the game along with fantasy teams in the game where you can do custom paint schemes and colors and all sorts of things and really get more in depth with the game and make it your own rather than just simply having to stick with the NASCAR rosters. I would love to see that, and I think Steam Workshop would be great for that. So those are some of my thoughts after watching the video. Let me know your thoughts in the section below. Do you see a lot of promise in the game? Or was NASCAR really shot itself in the foot last year with this game? Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and stay tuned for more NASCAR Heat 2.